everyone, this video is about T.S.Eliot's a very famous play, Murder in the Cathedral. Next is about the play. It is a historical play based on a real incident. The play was first performed in the year 1935 and it portrays the assassination of Thomas Becket, an archbishop, during the period of King Henry II. And it has two parts and there is an interlude between part 1 and part 2. Here the themes are listed out. First one, worldly power versus spiritual power. Here the worldly power refers to the political power. The second one is pride. Pride is a major conflict within the play. And the third one is martyrdom. Martyrdom, which means the death or suffering of a martyr. So here martyr is obviously the Archbishop Thomas Becket. So friends, you can also find it out various themes on analyzing it. The major characters in the play are Thomas Becket. He was an Archbishop of Canterbury and the former Chancellor of England. And the next is the chorus. The chorus comprises the women of Canterbury. And next is a herald. He was a messenger who brought the news that Becket was about to enter Canterbury. And 3 priests, 4 tempters, 4 knights, Henry II, the King of England, and the last one is Alexander Pope. Next, the background of the play. Thomas Becket was born around the year 1120 to a prosperous London merchant. He became well educated and he joined as an agent to Theobald, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury at that period of time. After the death of Theobald in the year 1161, the King Henry II appointed Becket as the Archbishop of Canterbury in the year 1162. Thomas Becket became the strong defender of the church and the rights of the clergy people. Everything went fine as the king expected until the problem arose regarding the punishment that must be given to the clergyman who committed a mistake. According to the king, the clergy must be punished under his court in his judgment. But Becket argued that the clergy should be punished under the judgment of Pope. So this led to an argument. The king got irritated and so he exiled Becket to France for 7 years. After completing his 7 years of exilement, Becket returned to England. From here, the first part of the play begins. So here's the summary of part 1. The first part opened in Archbishop's Hall on December 22nd, 1170. The chorus, who were the comprised women of Canterbury, gathered in the church and they all felt that something was going to happen terribly. So they started standing in front of the God and they started discussing how they had suffered in the absence of Archbishop Thomas Becket, and they also discussed how they would suffer in the presence of Thomas Becket. They did not want Becket to return because they all had a fear that Becket's return would result in his death. Next, the 3 priests who served Becket in the past time had entered the church. Meanwhile, the herald, who is a messenger, so he brought an information that Becket had entered England and he was about to reach Canterbury. On hearing this news, there were tons of questions discussed among the priests. They started recalling the past times of Thomas and had a confusion that Becket's return would result in peace or in his death. While hearing all these conversations, the fear in chorus had increased. Suddenly, the second priest, he insisted chorus and the other priest to welcome Becket with a smile in their face. So friends, please note that there were no names for the priest. They are numbered as first, second and third. So please be clear in this. As soon as the second priest insisted everyone, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Becket, entered the church. Next, the 4 tempters followed him one by one. The first tempter, he was the childhood friend of Becket. He arrived first and he told Becket to lead a carefree life as like the days which he had spent in his childhood days. Also, he advised Becket to maintain a friendly relationship with the king, but Becket rejected this idea. Next, the second tempter, he advised Becket to guide the country again by reclaiming his position as chancellor. But Becket was not okay with this temptation, so he rejected this. Next, the third tempter, so he convinced Becket to join the sides of barons, because barons were the ones who always acted against the king. But Becket was also not okay with this idea. Next, the last tempter, so he was the fourth tempter. He suggested Becket to die for his beliefs by becoming a martyr. So as I said before, martyr was a person who sacrifices his soul for the sake of God. So this temptation had shaken Becket. So according to the temptation of fourth tempter, Becket decided to choose the idea of martyrdom so that he would be remembered for more than ages, while his enemies would be forgotten within the age. So eventually the first part ends here. So next there was an interlude before starting part 2. The interlude was set up in the church on Christmas morning in 1170. In this interlude, Thomas Becket had delivered the long speech about the mystery of Christianity, in which he told that people mourn and celebrate the Christ's death. Also, he told that the true martyr was the instrument of God. Here, he concluded his speech. After this, the part 2 of the play begins. And here's the summary of part 2. The 4 knights entered the church. They told that they came regarding Henry's business from France, and they asked the priest to allow them to meet Thomas Becket. The priests tried to distract them. At that instant, Becket entered. When Becket entered, he was insulted and he was called as traitor by the knights. They also told Becket was disloyal to the king and blamed he had misused the position of archbishop. But Becket did not accept all their blamings. When Becket refused to accept, the knights tried to attack Becket, but it was prevented by the priest. The knights demanded Becket to release all the church members who was excommunicated by Becket for attending the marriage ceremony of the King Henry II's son. But Becket refused this demand of the knights. So the knights became angry and they threatened Becket for death, and they left the place. On seeing all these happenings, chorus gave a cruel speech, but somehow Becket tried to convince them. But Becket within himself had a fear that witnessing his death would affect their life severely. Later, the knights entered again drunkenly. On hearing their sounds, priests requested Becket to escape from that place, but Becket refused and told that he was even ready to accept his death as a God's will. The knights entered and forced Becket in the room, and they stabbed him one by one. After the murder was done, the knights decided to address the audience directly. They wished to explain the reason for their actions. The first knight has no eloquence, so he just introduced the second knight to the people. The second knight entered and he understood the situation that was prevailing among the audience. And he told the people that the knights were uninterested in the murder and addressed that they had followed the order of the King Henry II, which was always necessary to lead a good England. Next, the third knight, he entered and told that Becket was guilty of betraying the English people, and so that was the only reason for killing him. At last, the fourth knight, he entered and told that Becket had willed his own death in the name of martyrdom for the sake of pride and the guilty of suicide. Eventually, the knights made people believe that Becket had committed suicide. And then they asked people to disperse without making any troubles. After the knights had left, the priests lamented the death of Thomas Becket and accepted that Canterbury has received a saint. Next, the chorus, the comprised women of Canterbury, They requested God to forgive them and asked the God to bless the Thomas Becket. Finally, the story ends here. So friends, I hope this video will be helpful for you, and thanks for watching.